Dearest God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. One of the most common things that people ask me when they meet me and know that I've transitioned from political life back into the pulpit is, what's it like? And I usually say the same thing, and that is, being in political life is a little bit like being a chaplain in a war zone. There's only so many tours of duty you can do before you have to come home. So I'm home, and it's wonderful. This afternoon, we're not only going to have the Premier here preaching, but we're going to have probably about 30 representatives, political representatives from various levels of government. And I want to say a few things about politicians, because I was one. When I was first elected, a few myths were burst. Number one, that politicians are lazy. Nothing is farther from the truth. In fact, in political life, you're working about 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whenever you've got your BlackBerry or your iPhone, you are always working. The other myth is that politicians are greedy, even further from the truth. Most politicians who are in public service could make more money in private life, particularly the lawyers. For all politicians, they start off on the political journey with the same idealism. And that is, no matter whether I disagree with them, whether we disagree with them and hate what they do, they all start off wanting to make a difference for the better in the lives of the people that they serve. And then, of course, between the reality and the actuality falls the shadow. And like so many professions, when you get there, you get ground down. And you learn that it's really about winning the next election more than it is about serving because you won the last one. And it doesn't matter how many majority governments you seem to get. It's always about next year, next time. The classic quote, the art of the possible. Neville Chamberlain once famously, as Prime Minister of Great Britain, walked across the aisle to speak to the opposition members and came back to his own party. And one of his cabinet ministers said to him, "Mr. Prime Minister, why are you speaking to the enemy?" And he said, "No, no, no. They are the opposition. The enemy sits behind me." And that is also true of political life. And even for those who are outside of political life but hold politicians' feet to the fire, which I hope is all of us, those who fight for social justice, which I hope is all of us, those who fight for the oppressed, which I hope is all of us, even for those folk, you never really realize your dreams of that society that we all long for and hunger for, where everyone is fed, where everyone is housed, and where everyone is loved. Because that's politics, it's the art of the possible. But here, we are about making the impossible possible. What's joyous about faith communities, what's miraculous about church communities, is that we're living the dream now. Now, if you're sitting on a finance committee, you might not feel that every week. But I can tell you that there's only one reason to be here. There's only one reason to be part of a faith community, and that is to learn to love each other and to care for each other and to create the kind of world we all wished we lived in and to live in it now. Not pie in the sky when we die, now. How do we do that? Well, we do that by loving our children into being, by teaching them values that will carry them through their lives, by walking with our seniors, by being there in hospital rooms when people ail. We do that by being truly democratic, by actually being representative of the community, and by never just looking inward, by always looking outward to extend what we experience here to everyone. We want everyone to experience what we experience as the faithful. And that is truly building a community of Christian resistance. And we've done it for thousands of years, independent of everything politically happening around us. And the perfect example is Mark today, where Jesus heals people. He just heals people. He doesn't, and I'm sure he might have wanted to, struggle for pharmacare. I do. I'm sure he wanted Medicare. I'm sure he wanted the Roman occupation to end because it was evil and it was oppressive. But he didn't wait for that. He healed now. He loved now. He lived now in that wonderful and glorious moment. Now, after last week's service, a lovely woman came up to me and she said, she came from the Roman tradition, and she said, you know, when you said, and quoted Martin Luther, sin boldly and love Christ more boldly still, when you talked about works righteousness and this idea that you can work your way to heaven, which I think is dispelled very clearly in this Corinthian passage. Doesn't matter what you eat, says Paul. You can't eat your way to heaven. Passage always makes me hungry, that one. You can't, it doesn't matter what it doesn't even matter really what you do. It matters about your gratitude. It matters if you have faith. By faith alone, the Reformers said, will we be saved. And what does that look like? I mean, we also talked about the Nazi church. We talked about cheap grace that Bonhoeffer talked about, that, scattered around. That in the Nazi church of the Third Reich, what kind of sermons did they preach? Well, I'm okay, you're okay, everything's okay. That's not what faith alone speaks to. What faith alone and not working your way to God speaks to is that you can tell a person that has faith by what they do, not to earn their way to heaven, but to thank God, to thank Christ for the incredible blessings which we have right now. You can tell them their faith by what they do. It's in thank you to God that we act. It's not to earn any reward. And that's what Christian community does. That's what building a church of Christian resistance does. And if we want to know how practical that can be, we can look at history. We can look at 9/11, where the churches that ringed around that area provided triage and food and community. You look at this church, when there was a bomb scare at the JCC at the corner, that provided community and food and compassion and love. It's about the church that happened under the USSR, the Polish church that became a center of resistance to that regime. It's about this church, this United Church of Canada, that in 1988 ordained openly gay and lesbian folk 30 years ago, this year, which we're going to celebrate at Pride, that in 1936 ordained women, one of the first to do that, that did not only apologize to our First Nations, but put money behind that apology and was the first to do so. So if you think it's important that this church survive and that this United Church of Canada survive, I can tell you it is critically important, because without this place, without this community, where to those who need love and need community and need to have their children raised and their seniors cared for, where do they go? Because I can tell you no other organization exists only to teach us to love each other. This is the only one. So, should we tear down churches and build condos? I don't think so. Should we, disavow these buildings? I don't think so. Should we disavow these communities? Should we care if we survive or not? I think so. And we're going to start right here. We're going to make it happen right here. And guess what? We are making it happen right here. And it has been happening right here. And we exist to welcome everyone else into this beautiful, loving, compassionate place. And you get to try it out this afternoon at 2 o'clock. even with the politicians. May you be raised up on eagle's wings. May you be breathed out like the breath of dawn, and may you all shine like the sun. Amen.